Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Got another project, of course. Endless projects in this house. Whole thing's kind of like a canvas for my wife and I. We just do crazy stuff, including the playhouse. That's right back there that I built 2 years ago. So today what we're going to be doing is taking what used to be my wife's pastry kitchen, which is sort of like a craft room if you're married to a pastry chef, and we're turning it into a wet bar. She's not doing the business as much, so we don't have a need for a dedicated space. So we're going to kind of reclaim some of the space and bring it back. So I've already taken out the kitchen that was here. And what we're gonna put in place is just a couple base cabinets with a little mini fridge. I'm gonna do a butcher block countertop across the top. And I'm gonna build in a desk over there as my temporary workspace during COVID and everything else. And eventually that'll be a kid's homework and craft type space. So the first issue and first thing that we need to address is I went the cheap route on cabinets, and I got these at a overstock store for about $100 each, which is really nice. But what I need is to make room for a sink. And the two cabinets I have are just standard drawer bases. Now the only real difference between a drawer base or a regular cabinet base and a sink base is the very top, and whether there's a drawer at the top or whether it's an open space that's meant to accommodate the bottom of the vessel. So my cabinet, this one here in the corner that I'm going to be using as a sink base, isn't one right now. There's two ways that we can go about converting it. I could take the front of this drawer off. So just simply pull the drawer out, take that off, and just screw it directly to here. And essentially we'd have a sink base. That'd be the simple way to do it. And we're gonna call that plan B. So if plan A fails, that's what we're gonna do. Plan A though, is gonna be a little bit more creative, and thought, well, why not? Because again, if I screw it up, just throw it away, go to plan B. So what I'm gonna do, since my sink that I'm putting in here is just a bar sink, it's like a little, probably 12-inch or maybe 16-inch sink. And it's gonna sit roughly in the middle of this, and this is a 30-inch cabinet. So what I'm gonna try to do, if you kind of picture a sink sitting right here, if the sink is roughly centered, that'll leave me with a gap on the left and a gap on the right, which would be usable drawer space, as well as this kind of piece in the front here. Now, if I was gonna do just a regular sink base and get rid of this drawer, what I'd probably do is do a tip out front, and they make these kind of very shallow, sort of triangular shaped shelves that would hold things when you have it tipped out, so you can kind of put like sponges, that kind of thing in. But my sink is very small that I'm looking at for this. So I think I can actually get quite a bit of this space out. So what I'm gonna do is, well, buy the sink, get the countertop, figure out exactly where that's going to sit. And then I'm going to drop straight down from there and measure where the base of the sink will be. And I think it'll come about right here and go across to about right there. I'll draw that on the line. I'm gonna build a little wall for this drawer. And essentially I'm just gonna wall off the sink. So we get something that's kind of shaped like a capital U. And that should give me a usable drawer that when you pull it out, you'll be able to tell there's a void in it. But when you push it in all the way, you won't know that there's a sink there necessarily, or actually you won't know that there's a drawer there rather, and it still won't impact the plumbing or anything else. So that's the project that we're gonna try. All right, so several weeks have passed since we did that first video talking about modifying this cabinet. In the time since, I have completed the wet bar. I've put the sink in place. I've measured out kind of where everything sits, and I used those measurements kind of with the drawer in place before the sink was actually set, but using the cutout for it to mark where the edges of that sink are going to interface with the drawer. And this is the void then that I'm going to remove. So very carefully, I'm going to cut the back piece along that line. And then that back piece is going to become the front piece. And then I'm going to use a couple pieces of 1x3 that I have from other projects to make a piece goes here and here. Now with the base, when I cut that out, I'm going to cut it to the edge here, and I'll have to go a little bit past. I want to leave just enough material so that I can put a little slot in my 1x3 and have this side piece that's staying go into the piece as well as that side. So we should end up with something that's really stable. I'll just use like 2 pocket screws in the front and 2 in the back, and we should have a workable kind of U-shaped drawer that fits around our sink. So I'm using a hacksaw, and as you can see, I've cut most of the way through. One of the tricks that you have for this, if you want to do a cut like this without taking the drawer apart first, because everything here is kind of glued and stapled and I don't want to worry about it, is once you get most of the way through, to get this last little bit without it breaking, flip the whole shelf over, and then you can actually use your saw and run from this side and just get this last little notch. That way the wood won't tear. Okay, the back piece is removed, and I've kind of positioned that forward so I can do my measurements. My side pieces then are going to go kind of on this side going this way, and then they'll end out into those back pieces there. For the base, what I'm going to do is go about halfway. You can see this piece of wood that I took out has this little channel that base sits in. I'm going to mimic that in my two side pieces. So I don't want to cut all the way to the width of that side piece. I'm only going to go halfway. That way I can cut a channel and have that board just sit nice and flat in there, and everything will be captive and look like it was meant to be this way. I also did measure, and these pieces, kind of top to bottom, are 3 inches. So my 1x3 is only going to be 2.5 inches. So instead, I'm going to use a couple pieces of 1x4, which I'll use my table saw to cut a 1/2 inch off. I'll have 3-inch pieces, and everything will match all the way around. From my original measurements, I expanded by 1/2 inch. That's going to allow me the overhang on the cutout pieces. Next step is going to be to cut the base out. I'm doing that just with a hacksaw. Because this is all released, you can kind of bend this part out of the way to get it started. And I'll work my way down to the edge, then do the same thing on the other side and cut across the middle. My side pieces are ripped down, so now I'm going to deal with this channel. Now, if you have a table router, this is pretty easy to do with just a straight bit. Just cut and just run it through. I don't. I have a handheld router, which just makes this a little bit trickier. So what I'm going to do is use my table saw, and I'm going to set this blade so it only comes up about yay high off the deck, and I'm going to measure it so that I can set my guard and have my material run like that and have the saw cut this little channel for me. Now I'm going to have to reposition once. If you kind of look at the width of the blade versus the width of the channel. So I'll have to cut the first one and then move it over slightly and cut the second one, all at the same depth. On my saw, it took 3 passes, but you can see I've got my nice channel now. Run through from my blade. It took 3 passes just to get the proper width. Boards are all cut and assembled and test fit, and everything's lined up right. So now what I'm going to do is 2 pocket holes here facing that way, 2 of them there facing that way. And then I'm going to cut 2 pocket holes on either side of this piece going to the outside. That is a 1/2 inch. These are 3/4, so you'll have to adjust your jig a little bit if you have the same type of cabinets as mine. But that will end up with a U-shaped drawer that we should be able to get reinstalled and have slot nicely around our sink. So the finished product is assembled and reinstalled on the tracks, and most importantly, it closes. So if I'm completely honest, I'm a little bit surprised that that worked, but it totally did. So this project is done, which means it's time for a dad joke. So why are wall cabinets available without a prescription? Easy, they're available over the counter. All right, that's it from me. Remember, the first step in any DIY project is just to do it. We'll see you next time.